Okay, well, welcome everybody to this discussion, or to this feedback session rather, with Brother Ricardo Maarman, who we had a panel discussion with a few weeks ago after he submitted filed papers with the Constitutional Court regarding the isolation of the virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, said to be causing the disease COVID-19. And Ricardo is going to give us an update as to where that matter stands and the way forward. So without any further ado, well, you may know me, I'm Dr. Faiz Kirsten, and we have with us Advocate Sabelo Sibanda and Dr. Ahmad Sali. And you obviously have, by now, most people would know Brother Ricardo Maarman. Okay, so Ricardo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. And thank you very much for this opportunity again to share with everybody what has happened so far. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just recap what we have done, and then I'll explain the result and what we are going to do going forward. So basically what we have done on the 26th of February, we approached the Constitutional Court, and we have asked the Constitutional Court to give us direct access, and then obviously in doing so, to give us an order to the government in the form of the presidency, Ramaphosa, and to Dlamini Zuma. And the order is that they should produce for us to confirm, for us and the court, to confirm the SARS-CoV-2 virus. We wanted this confirmation to be done within 14 days, and we wanted them to show us the isolated and purified form of the virus with no admixtures or anything like that. And also for us to be able to confirm it through our own direct observation. We've asked this of the court, as I said, on the 26th of February. The reason why we approached the court directly, because we believe then, and we still do, that the result of what we ask for will create or could create a constitutional crisis. And so that's why we approached the court. That's the one reason. The other reason is because of the importance of this matter and the urgency thereof. We felt that if we approached any other court first, that we would find ourselves in a situation where, the government could potentially refuse, appeal the matter, and we would escalate eventually to different courts, delaying therefore the decision that could restore, that could find justice rather. And in this instance, there is a lot of cost at stake here. The cost to our economy is racking up. The cost of people being deprived of their rights is racking up. And the cost of lives is racking up as well. And that's why these are the reasons why we thought that we should approach the Constitutional Court directly. Now, subsequently, the court has come back to us. The court has made a decision. I can't now remember on the top of my head, but I think there was a quorum of the court, which is about 6 judges or so. They've made their decision, and their decision is that they will not grant us direct access to the Constitutional Court, and therefore they won't grant this order. They could have, on face value, this sounded, like a disappointment. It did, obviously. But when we analyze this judgment carefully, we realize they could have said that you don't have a reasonable chance of success, you don't have a good case, etc. There's a number of things that they could have told us. But in this instance, they just said, we're not granting you access right at the moment, direct access to us. So what we have done then with that decision is we have said, okay, we will then approach the High Court, and we've done so already. So we have approached the High Court, and we've asked the High Court then now to order the government. And now, because we had a little bit of time that elapsed and certain events that took place, that brought certain things to our attention. And so now our order or our request from the court has changed just a little bit. We've asked the court again, we want the government in the form of Ramaphosa, the presidency, and the Minister of COCTA. And now we have included Professor Karim as well to provide us the virus, SARS-CoV-2 virus, in isolated and purified form. And we have reduced the time frame. We have said now we would like to have this in 7 days. Our argument is that there should be no reason why there should be a delay. With almost 2 million people in South Africa that supposedly have the virus, and so many labs that have claimed that they've isolated it, it should be quite readily available. And so therefore we have reduced the time frame to 7 days, the same request. We still do believe that it could create a constitutional crisis. But I just want to speak on another matter here. When we submitted our documents and our application to the Constitutional Court, of course, as everybody is aware of, the requirement is that at that very same moment, we've also presented these documents to the presidency and to the Minister of COCTA. So they are aware of our request from the 26th of March. They have subsequently come back to me and asked me, what's happening with the case and all of that. I don't know, I think somehow they got mixed up. They maybe didn't get direct communication from the court. I don't know what's the issue, but they are aware. The point I'm trying to drive home here is they are aware now for more than a month of the requests that we have made, and they have not delivered. They have not chosen to show the virus to the people. The second thing is after we have made the submission to the court, I think a week or so, or 2 weeks even after that, there was a panel of scientists and a discussion that the government held with the Minister of Health, plus Professor Karim. And I think they intended also to have the gentleman in KwaZulu-Natal, I forgot his name now, that claimed that he isolated the South African variant, okay? But they had this discussion, and they discussed how this variant was isolated, etc. But they chose not to, even at that stage, to say, look, we've heard of this request, and so we want to set the record straight. And so here is the isolation. We will do it in public. And here people are seeing now the virus is isolated, end of story. So two things, maybe I'll stop here, but before I stop, I just want to add two things that maybe we can then just, I can expand more in the form of questions or things that you might want me to focus on a bit better. But two things is, they are aware of our request. They could have easily come forward. In fact, we believe they should have. I mean, it's a year that this pandemic is and the lockdown is going on. And this is a basic thing. Parliament, the cabinet, everybody should have from the very beginning asked for confirmation that the virus indeed exists and that it is deadly before they've made any of these kind of actions. So that's the first point I want to make. The fact that they have asked me, is everything still going on? What is the court's decision? And all of that, very recently they've asked me that, shows they are aware of it. And they know that it's very easy to satisfy our request and to end the story. But they prefer for us rather to fight this out in court, I guess. The second one is now we've gone to court. They have a limited time period to get back to us. If they don't get back to us, our request to the court is such that on the 20th of April, if the government does not respond to this, and the response that they have is to say, we object to showing you the virus, and then they obviously have to furnish the reasons why they object, and we will challenge them. We will have a hearing in court, and the judge will have to make a decision. If they don't do that, then there will be automatic judgment in our case, default judgment, and they will then have to comply. If they don't, then we will apply to the judge to declare that there is no virus if the government cannot produce it. And then, of course, if that is the case, that the court declares there's no virus, then we believe that we have a constitutional crisis. Why will we have a constitutional crisis? Because the lack of a virus will show that the government does not have proper justification and basis for having done what they have done. And many of these actions, even if there is a deadly virus out there, many of the actions of the government still can be questioned that it might be crimes that they are committing against people. But if there is no virus, then this reasonable suspicion becomes even stronger. And then, of course, we intend fully to pursue the prosecution, or to at least have these people held responsible if there's no virus here. I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Ricardo. I just have a question for you before I give the opportunity to others to speak. Why did you ever consider using the Freedom of Information Act and going straight to government using that act? in order to access that information regarding the isolation and existence of the virus. Because I'm thinking of Christine Massey. Are you familiar with her work? She's a biostatistician from Canada, and she, using the Freedom of Information Act in various countries, approached, I think there's more than 50 health agencies now in those countries, requesting that they provide evidence that the virus has been isolated. And every one of them, bar none, have come back to her stating that they have no record of the isolation of the virus. So she went directly to these agencies, government health agencies, and using legal means, the Freedom of Information Act, the statute, that asked them for the evidence. And they all came back, it's all on record, that they don't have that evidence. They don't have a record of the isolation of the virus. So I'm very curious to know or to find out, did you consider this approach or not? Was it ever an option that you considered?
In fact, that's why we believe we have such a strong case. So to answer your question in short, yes, we have made a freedom of information. I've made a freedom of information request, if I'm just putting it correctly. I've made that request in April last year. So the 27th of April, I've requested this. I've made the request directly to them, and I've received zero information to this point. And so therefore, I've made more than one request for information to the government related to the lockdown. Of course, I wanted to have all the information. Firstly, I'll just explain to you in brief the request that I've made related to the lockdown. So the first one is 27th of April. Please, government, provide us all the information that you have used that informed your decision to lock down the country. Epidemiological reports, etc. Because the argument for this was, obviously, I'm a South African citizen, you're taking away my rights, I have a right to know, you must provide me with this information. And as well, we're dealing here with what I've told them, a probabilistic disaster. This was not a clear and present disaster for everyone to see. So therefore, it is important for the government to then provide that information relating to that. So that first information request that we put on the 27th of April, 2020, I received a response, I think more than a month later. And the response was, we're going to pass it on to the COCTA department. I made the request directly to the presidency saying that I understand you have this issue, the minister of COCTA is in charge or whatever, but the president made the announcement. So he should have the information at hand for what he's saying. And so the presidency transferred my request, gave me proof of the transferred my request to COCTA. And I think if I'm just speaking a bit under correction, I have to look at the documents and the trails. COCTA then transferred it to the Ministry of Health, and I've heard nothing. And this request was made 27th of April. So we say to the court that this doesn't work. And so therefore the court has to put an order through. Just for interest's sake, I've also made a request for asking the government about the IMF loans, to ask whether to give us full disclosure, not only on the IMF loans, but all loans related to the lockdown and to this pandemic, and to tell us and to tell me what, if there was any collateral for these loans, what were they, etc. And also, I mean, we all know the IMF, when they give out these loans, there's conditions that could affect your monetary policy, fiscal policy, and that sort of stuff. It could affect our sovereignty. And I've asked them to explain to me these kind of details. Again, the president made these statements in his speech. I asked him to provide the information. He referred me to Treasury. I have still not received any information. And that request was made, I think, around May last year. And then the other request that I made to the government relating to the lockdown is they've developed a tracking and tracing system. And I've informed them, I'm not quite sure, I think it's Telkom and Samsung are the two companies that are involved with this. And it's public knowledge, I explained to the presidency then, it's public knowledge that Telkom has foreign shareholding, foreign shareholders. I think one of the shareholders is Vanguard, an American private equity firm with all kinds of connections. And the other is Samsung that are developing the tracking and tracing. And Samsung there was claims, public claims that Samsung was hacked by the CIA I think either Samsung admitted that in fact it did happen, or they just kept quiet on the issue. But I raised the issue with the presidency and say, how secure is our information with these people? Explain to us what safeguards are you putting in place of vetting, etc. Again, I was referred to the Minister of Communications, and again, nothing came back from that. And then the other request that I made was a request about the World Health Organization. I asked the president, what is the standing of the World Health Organization? Why are you seeming to obey the World Health Organization like this? Isn't South Africa a sovereign democracy? Where does the World Health Organization fit within our constitutional framework? Which of the World Health Organization officials did you speak to? Because this pandemic is a matter of national security. Did you vet these people? Who are these people? The response that I gave to that question was, again, this is all last year, all before July last year. And the response he gave to this answer by the World Health Organization is, the virus broke out in Wuhan and the World Health Organization declared it, and we are a member of the World Health Organization. That's it. That's the answer I got. I also asked the question about Bill Gates. I asked the president, I said, Mr. President, I heard publicly that I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the letters in front of me, but Bill Gates claims that you met with him and that you discussed the pandemic with him and South Africa's response and all of that. And I said, the reason why I'm asking this question is because who is Bill Gates? What is his standing? Is he representing the American government? On what basis are you speaking to him? And this pandemic is a matter of national security. Aren't you putting our national security at risk by speaking to a foreign national? And we do not know what is his ties to probably our foreign adversaries, etc. And the president responded, the presidency responded, and they said the president met with Bill Gates, but he did not meet with him in person. They had a telephonic conversation. And in this conversation, all that they discussed was that Bill Gates was going to donate testing equipment and help with research. That's it. And he was, I think he was a bit maybe concerned with my questioning. He made it clear, the part of the question he did answer was that he met Bill Gates in his capacity as head of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I went into a little bit of detail there, Dr. Kirsten, but the thing is that's why we feel we have a pretty strong case. We have exhausted this avenue with very little success from the government.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Ricardo. Yeah, thank you for that detailed response. I almost think I stand open to correction, saw a photograph with the president and Bill Gates. It may have been another president. It could have been Thabo Mbeki or Jacob Zuma, but I'm pretty almost certain I saw President Ramaphosa with Bill Gates. I stand open to correction, but I've seen several presidents, a photograph of them and Bill Gates. Whether they're doctored photographs or not, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I saw Ramaphosa also with Bill Gates. Anyway, the floor is open. If anybody has questions for Ricardo, you can ask him, pose the questions.
Hi, Sabilo.
Sorry, I've been breaking on and off, but I think I'm in a more stable area now. I'm just interested, Ricardo, the part that I was able to hear fully was the application that you have done and that you started at the Concord. What reason exactly did they give you for not treating the Concord as a court of first instance in a matter like this one and referring you back to the High Court instead?
Unfortunately, Sabelo, they gave no reason. So they just said, look, they're not going to grant direct access, end of story. And as I'm sure you're aware, obviously we have very little place to go. Once the Concord decides, that's the end of it. But look, when we have now sat down and discussed the matter, with our legal team here, we have came to the idea that this case is very important, right? And the matter does become a matter of constitutional concern. However, it only happens when the government cannot produce the virus. And it's the Constitutional Court is not the only court that can give the order for the government to produce the virus. So I guess, we're giving the court that side the benefit of the doubt that they had superior wisdom there to say, look, the High Court can give the order as well. And once the order has been granted and the government then cannot produce the virus, which we think they wouldn't be able to, and then we have a problem. And then we have a problem that involves the entire executive of government, the entire legislature, and it's only the Constitutional Court that can then deal with the matter.
I have a question.
Thanks, Ricardo. Thank you, my brother.
So my question is just for clarification. If you could explain to me exactly the, COCTA, I'm not familiar with that, and also the Court of Concord. And then just also if you've studied the cases in Portugal, Holland, the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, where they actually won cases and they declared that all these lockdowns were unconstitutional. Just some of those questions I have.
Yeah, sorry about that. The Constitutional Court is the highest court in the land here, and the reason why we approach them is because we believe that this is the matter of highest importance, and it involves obviously the other two parts of the government, namely the executive branch of the government in the presidency, and it involves the legislature and how they function and what they've done and what is right, and etc. And the Constitution clearly states that it's the Constitutional Court that has the authority to decide on these matters when it's there. That's why we approach the Constitutional Court is the highest court in South Africa. The COCTA, what happens here is COCTA is the, I think is the Ministry of Local Government or Cooperative Governance. I think that's what it stands for. But the reason why that ministry is important is because with this declaration of disaster in South Africa, that minister has become the de facto president of the country. So that minister is basically running all officially, having the authority to run all affairs related to the lockdown. And because this is a nationwide lockdown, and this lockdown is so far-reaching, she's arguably the de facto president. And that's part of the reason in my communication, I've been trying to communicate directly to the president. And also in our argument, and part of the argument that we've made to the court as well is that there's a reason why we communicate directly to the president, because we do not believe, because this is going to become an issue eventually, who's responsible for this. And so now I think part of the machinations that is going on here is to create this confusion. If there's no virus, who do we blame here? Do we blame the president or do we blame the Minister of COCTA? And our view is both. The president there are many reasons why he should be blamed directly. One is he was acting like he's making all the decisions. He was giving all the speeches and he was making the announcements. And then he was saying to the nation, after I make this speech and announcement, tomorrow the ministers are going to flesh it out, etc. So he was acting like there was no doubt here. He's in charge. So that's the one we will argue, and we have said to the court that the court can deem him to be in charge, regardless of these confusions here. And secondly, the Constitution gives the president the powers to mobilize the military. He's the commander-in-chief. And for this lockdown, he ordered the military into activity. So he's involved. So what I'm trying to explain to you is that the Minister of COCTA is important here, because under this declaration of disaster, we have basically got two presidents de facto. One is de facto president, the minister, because she's the authority on all matters relating to the lockdown. And the lockdown, as you could see, is pervasive and comprehensive. So she's essentially the president. And then you have the president is still the president. So these are the two issues that you have there. That's why they are both, part of, they are both respondents here.
The issue of the other countries that had successful outcomes.
I was not aware of the Austria and the others until today, but we were aware of Portugal, and we have included the Portuguese ruling into our submission to the court as well. We've stated to the court, I personally don't like this, that South Africa, our constitution has forced the judges to consider international law. I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe I'll just briefly explain why I think so. Because we might not necessarily have full control over international law. It happens, like, for example, here there's a ruling in Portugal. We don't choose the judges there. We don't choose nothing there. We have no influence, but we are bound by laws that are happening like that. So that's just my personal objection to it. But legally, we have told the court, argued with the court now that the Constitution says you should consider international law. A respected country, Portugal, and their courts made a ruling that the PCR test is invalid. And so therefore you have to consider that. And obviously that is part of our case saying you cannot come to us with a sequence, RNA or DNA sequence from the PCR test and then says that is an proof of isolation because a court has just ruled that it is, you can't rely on it. So yes, we did include the Portuguese ruling, but obviously at the time that we did all this, we were not aware of the other courts.
Thanks for that, Ricardo. I just want to make one point about the Constitutional Court and the rulings that it makes. I'm aware of at least one case where they just gave a one-line response, which was no prospect of success. So it doesn't seem as if the Constitutional Court is obliged to give any explanation for their orders or judgments or rulings, So to answer Sabelo's question, it doesn't seem as if they have any obligation to do so. So one-line response or one-line order is just no prospect of success. We don't have to explain why. Anyway, Sister Noah,
that is true. Can I just come in again, Dr. Kirsten? No, you're
sure.
right. That they do have that discretion, in as much as at times they do elaborate further as to their reasoning, but then they generally take that line where they'll give you a one-liner and that's it, end of the road. You don't really have anything to chase up on. And I'm just wondering as well, Ricardo, I'm just thinking in my mind, there is this tendency, especially when it comes to these people in authority, to want to raise the defense of acting on advice. The National Council, whatever its full name is called, to what extent can we anticipate and therefore begin to prepare arguments against a possible defense that comes in and says, well, look, I'm just the president and I'm not a scientific person. That's why I put together this team. And the team basically advised me along the following lines. I'm not sure if maybe you did touch upon it when I had lost network along the way. If you have, I apologize for you to have to repeat the point.
Thank you very much for that question there, Sabelo. Firstly, I want to extend an invitation to you to join us. As you can imagine, we are up against people here with a lot of resources, and we don't have much. So our legal team is very small as it is. So I extend an invitation if you would like to join us. But in terms of their responsibility, look, the president is the elected official here. So there's many reasons why we can argue he is responsible here. In terms of he's the one who swore the oath of office. Each of the members of parliament has done so. Yes, they receive advice, but they can choose their own, they elect their own advisors, etc. They are responsible in our view. And secondly, look, there's actions, there's a lot of evidence that is there, that they actively try to suppress certain information. So if you are sincere and you sincerely don't know what's going on and you are relying on information that you are receiving, then you would want to welcome as much information as possible. And so we've seen now over the years, we've seen here in South Africa how they've tried to even make legislation, some information should be even become illegal or stopped or discouraged. When the Chief Justice made statements, the president and the government went out of their way. They published a pamphlet, to try and go against what he has said. So some of the actions shows that you can't rely on that. If you are a sincere person and you sincerely don't know, then you are open to all kinds of information, and you don't actively try to suppress a certain portion of information if you are looking for information to make a decision. And the other thing is, in our legislation here, I think it is the laws referring to, I'm not quite sure, you would probably know this better than me. I think it's war crimes, crimes against humanity, one of those that says the elected officials have no place to hide there, that they are responsible directly. They cannot use a defense that they were just acting as in their office or under advice. No. If war crimes, or as I say, I'm not quite sure which one of these is, but it's one of the serious ones: war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide.
Yeah, war crimes, genocide, ones against. Yeah, you're correct. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Thanks a lot for that. So it's one of those they can't hide. They behind that.
So there's no place to hide for them regarding certain issues, which is actually obviously very important.
Definitely, I'll be keen to put my weight behind the process that we've already started, because I that you're working on, and Dr. Kirsten is aware of one of my frustrations with the legal fraternity, because it has been quite an effort to get lawyers to believe in this thing, and we run with it. So I'd be very happy to work with you and take the.
My sense is that the mainstream, the professionals basically in all disciplines, all areas, whether it's healthcare, legal, education, they all basically, most of them, majority follow the mainstream narrative. And so that's why it's difficult to get people on board, with what we are doing. But we just got to, continue, and hopefully, more and more will come on board and see the deception and the falsehood that exists in mainstream, arena. Sister Noah, would you like to say something? Welcome to Maulana Rafiq.
Yeah, I just have a quick question.
Yes, Dr. Ahmed, go ahead.
Yeah, so the question is, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. From what I understand from South African law, you've got the Roman Dutch law. Is that still the case? How can you still tap into common law? And also, I think there's no statute of limitation on murder. So if this really comes out to murder, then, this case could go on for many years or many decades. So just some clarification again on that. And knowing also that Holland or the Netherlands itself won a case, they were successful. So what is that connection out there? How do we navigate around all those laws?
I just want to bring on one point that you now mentioned, Dr. Ahmed. In fact, we met with Ricardo the other day, and I mentioned to him that, have they considered convening a common law court of record? And his opinion was that let's do the conventional court route first, which I tend to agree with. And then if that doesn't work, then plan B would to set up a common law court, grand jury perhaps. And but the problem is, regardless of that, it's the enforcement that matters. So whatever the jury decides, how do you enforce, their decision, their judgment? But anyway, Ricardo, you can go ahead and answer Dr. Ahmed if you like. You want?
Dr. Ahmed, I think you've answered me a question that I am not the expert on. I think I'll defer that to Advocate Sabella to answer the whole Roman Dutch part of it. But just my view is, and we approach this just to touch on some of the issues here, is that, look, ultimate authority, in my opinion, lies with the people of South Africa. So our constitution, so firstly, ultimate interpretation lies with the Constitutional Court. So they can interpret this, they can interpret our law and our constitution as they see fit. And hopefully they will interpret it in a naturally just way, hopefully. And then the other part is that the Constitution says, you know, that this is the Constitution of South Africa as it is adopted on behalf of, you know, on behalf of the people of South Africa. I'm paraphrasing. On behalf of the people of South Africa by their freely elected representatives. Okay, so in my understanding of that sentence, that the Constitution lends its authority from the people of South Africa. So I believe that ultimately, yes, ultimately judicial power and all of these kind of things ultimately rests with the people. But of course, these institutions have been set up here to advance the interests of the people. And if the people's interests cannot be served in this manner, then I don't think, you know, you can morally, you know, stop them from wanting to pursue their justice in a correct manner, in a moral manner themselves, you know. But anyways, that's just my opinion. Maybe Advocate can answer the legal.
Advocate Sabelo?
Sure. The issue of common law, there is an interesting aspect that we need to be clear on, that the current interpretation of common law and therefore application of common law treats basically Roman, Dutch, and English law as part of our common law, and that is what basically applies. Then there is statutory law, which is basically the laws that are enacted through parliament, etc., etc. But the common law,
We lost Sabelo.
people oriented.
Sabelo, you're breaking up. We can't hear you. It's broken up. Maybe you want to go on to Maulana Rafiq or Sister Noor. Would you like to say anything? Any questions for Ricardo?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Yes, I'm just wondering, since we are dealing with the very people who sort of writes the laws and who moves the goalpost, is there any chance that during this time, if they were to change the definitions of certain things, which we see them do all the time, the World Health Organization does it with what is a vaccine, for instance. I mean, if they change the definition of isolation or what is a virus, would that be an issue? I mean, retrospectively, considering when you started your case, would a new definition be applicable retrospectively?
If I can maybe just comment on that. Look, these people running the world, these globalists, they are basically a law unto themselves, basically. Look at the IMF, the World Bank, if you look at their constitutions, these people write laws basically to suit themselves, you know? So that is why nothing can touch them. They have immunity to everything. So if they change the definition, the World Health Organization change the definition of anything, that is now the law. Whether you like it or I like it or nobody likes it, doesn't matter. That is the law. So this is what we're dealing with. It's basically tyranny and subjective morality. This is what we're dealing with. And we've got to work our way around that, unfortunately. So if they say this is a definition of isolation, and they have defined what isolation is, but that's not isolation. But in terms of the law, that is isolation. The way they mutilate cell cultures, that is changed it.
If they change the definition of isolation, would that affect the application? Because we are obviously basing it on the current procedure for isolation. If they were to change that, the way they just change what is a vaccine, would that affect the case? Would the new definition be applicable retrospectively, because he's already applied, but would a new definition change things?
Don't know, Ricardo. What would you say?
Sorry about that. I'll join in after.
Okay, okay, Sabelo, thanks for that. Yeah, we're just trying to address Nua's comment. Ricardo?
I think no. The thing is, I don't think it would. If they change around it, you must understand. The World Health Organization can define things, medically and that sort of thing. But obviously, in the court now, it's going to be up to our courts to see what definition will they take for isolation. So we have told them what we mean by isolation and purification. That this virus should be. There should not be any other contaminants or anything mixed or whatever with it. It should stand alone, as it were. And it should be able to be physically observed directly and confirmed. So that is the criteria we are putting through to the court. Now, of course, they can come back and they can say, look, we have our own definition of that. And then we can argue which definition makes logical sense and which definition is not right. But then the court will have to make a decision here. So they wouldn't have a carte blanche and the final say here. The final say will be from the court to say what definition is right and what isn't, I think. So I think even if they change it, in fact, if they change it just like that, after we've done this, it would prove that they're trying to, they're busy with deception.
Evade, yeah, they're evading something. Then the second thing I wanted to ask is Section 36 of the Constitution, if I'm not mistaken, is basically refers to international law and how it would be applicable, and that it would, if like a state of emergency or the conditions were correct, to actually override the Bill of Rights, then everything collapses. The whole Constitution is basically just put on hold based on this event, whatever this is. Fortunately, we have a state of disaster and not a state of emergency. So if we had a state of emergency, they could do that. Does that risk still exist? Where they could just pull the rug out under us and international law is now applicable.
I would think, Advocate Sabelo can maybe as well come in here and maybe finish off the other point that he wanted to make, but also address your issue. But look, in my opinion, in terms of what you're saying here and in terms of what I've read and our submissions that we've made, yes, unfortunately, this is one of the, you see, there is something called the International Health Regulations. And that international health regulations, that all countries signed on to those health regulations and those govern international public health. And that gives all authority to the World Health Organization. And in that book or that set of regulations, the World Health Organization and them have gone and changed definitions. So they've changed what could be declared as a pandemic. They've changed it. And also they've given the Director General absolute authority to determine what is a pandemic and to declare it. So they've done that. And South Africa is a signatory to that. There's only two countries that objected to that, and that is the United States and Iran. They are the only two countries that objected. To be honest with you, I don't know what their objection means. Are they not part of it? Or what? But they are the only two out of 190 something countries. So now, under those international health regulations, if the World Health Organization declares a pandemic level 6, which I think they've done, then they become the de facto government of the entire world, because all health authorities now have to listen to them. And the health authorities are basically in charge of the country, because all countries now will have to follow health regulations as far as the lockdowns, etc. is concerned. So we are basically in that situation. But we say, look, once we overcome this hurdle of whether there is a virus or not, then we can then go into the situation of arguing those other things and international law, etc. And part of my view is, I don't want to, give out too much to our opponents at this stage, but hopefully they don't listen to this very much. But part of our view is that, look, we have reason to question the validity of our having signed these treaties in the first place. So we have because you must understand, a requirement for all of these treaties is especially from the United Nations, and all of these things eventually tie back to the United Nations. One of the requirements there is once a treaty is signed, which this international health regulation is, and all these other things, it needs to be ratified in the country by whatever proper mechanisms, etc. And we believe, and if it's not ratified properly, then it's not valid. Then it's not a valid contract or a valid agreement. And we believe we have strong case to argue that there might be question marks around South Africa's, whether we have properly entered into these treaties and whether they are valid or not. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, it's up to our constitutional court to interpret how or what kind of responsibility we have towards these treaties. But you are right, our constitution, unfortunately, has set us up in a situation for when we sign this kind of treaties, that it can basically nullify our entire constitution. It's just done on purpose. It's a clever trick, but we now have to try and see how we can counter that.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely Trojan horses built into our constitution. Thank you for that, Ricardo.
I just have a quick comment. I think we want to put you in contact with Christopher James. We now have direct access to his email. He's been introduced to us. In Canada, he's successfully fighting for the military and for the police. And he's winning so many cases based on common law, you know, and teaching that. So I think we're going to set up something very soon with Christopher James from Canada. He's got this website, I think, A Warrior Calls. I just want to applaud you for whatever you've done. We have Maulana Rafiq also on the Zoom, and
I will bring him in now, Dr. Ahmad. Yes, I just wanted to make one point before Sabelo just finishes off his last points.
Okay.
The definition of isolation. I mean, Christine Massey, in her request to these different health agencies, like I mentioned earlier on, she was very clear in what she means by isolation, which is the standard definition of isolation in virology also. And based on that definition, there were no records available from any of these health agencies. So if they change the definition of isolation, that's disingenuousness, I think, you know, dishonesty, basically. So isolation is isolation, no matter who defines it otherwise. It doesn't change. It's just isolation means isolation. Anyway, Advocate Sabelo, you wanted to finish off your point, and there's another point you needed to address, I think, Ricardo mentioned. What was the point? I just forget now, Ricardo.
It was the issue of, as Nuha actually raised the point, that the clause in our constitution that says we should be faithful and our Bill of Rights and everything should be subordinate to international law, well then is this Trojan horse that they will then use to try and subvert our whole system, you know, especially now using this pandemic and international health regulations, etc.
Okay. Maulana Rafiq will come in just now. Sabelo, Advocate Sabelo, if you can just address those issues, I'd appreciate it. And Maulana Rafiq can come in.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so the point I was making was that it's important to be clear on what we mean when we're talking about common law per se, because here the tendency is basically to confine the definition of common law to Roman Dutch law and English law as constituting the common law, contrary to what is generally referred to as statutory law. And what we are talking about here, when we're talking about the common law that we aspire to see basically take shape and develop, is more informed by what is classed here as customary law than those basically have been, and this is what the guys in Canada are also developing, a system of law that is informed by natural laws as against these imposed systems that were brought into the equation through the whole colonial invasions. And so we can pursue that particular aspect of challenging this issue of common law courts by way of section, because section 34 basically talks about addressing issues which are triable in law by way of a tribunal or an alternative platform. I can't remember the actual phraseology, but that is one of the avenues that as we go along, we need to start looking into. And now when it comes to the issue of international law overriding our local laws and therefore overriding the Bill of Rights, there are certain issues that have to come into play. For one, there has to be a clear declaration of a state of emergency. And the question that arises now, which is one of the reasons why I like the approach that Ricardo is taken, in the sense that by challenging the whole aspect of the isolation of the virus and therefore challenging the existence of the virus, you challenge necessarily any reason why we should be bound by international law in as far as the response to the so-called virus is concerned. Because
I've lost him again. Yeah, he's having a connectivity problem. Okay, so Maulana Rafiq, you want to come in the meantime?
we can establish
Oh, he's back, sorry.
affected. Hello?
Go ahead, Sabelo, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. And so basically what it does for us then is that we are not necessarily bound by these particular laws if they do not speak to our reality. And again, it's very, very important what Ricardo was talking about, the issue of the ratification of these particular pieces of legislation that we find ourselves now subjected to. If there is an issue with the ratification, then we are able to get out of it. And next thing is that the more we can push for our own common law courts, the more we take away
Yeah, look, I should come in here. It's very important to push for our own
these
common law
agreements
courts.
that have been. I beg your pardon?
Sorry, we lost you for a few seconds, Isabella. You can just pick up maybe from a minute before you went off. A minute
Yeah.
before now.
Yeah, no. I was saying that the point that Ricardo was making about the people being the ultimate authority is absolutely correct. And one of the ways that we pursue that is through the common law courts. And we call for a revision of these agreements that government has purportedly made in our name and on our behalf, looking at the aspect of ratification conditions that they've signed, if indeed interests of the people or not. So there are various going forward, which is
Isabella, you've broken up. All right, so I think Maulana Rafiq, you can come in. I don't know if he's going to get back, Sabelo. Maulana Rafiq, are you there?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm actually just here as a supportive observer, but Jazakallah for the opportunity, and also Jazakallah to all the panel here for making all the effort and the contributions that you are making. I'm just an interested observer, but also the last point that Sabelo just made, I strongly agree with him that we need to challenge the government when they say that they are making agreements on our behalf, the people of South Africa, with international agencies. So that's something we need to really pursue vigorously. Secondly, even the WHO organization itself, I mean, if there's a way that make, looking at some type of court case against the WHO. Now, if the WHO, we can successfully present to the larger international audience that they have a criminal record. They have gone against their mandate. So how can they be allowed to take over and give an authority over our country and over our government? So that's the line of action which we need to look at. Looking at their mandate, what they're supposed to be doing is protecting health. But in fact, criminal records that will indicate their past track record will show they've acted criminally, they're involved in crimes against humanity. I mean, there's so many cases. Just one case in point that is documented is Brazil. They were directly implicated with sterilizing over 40% of the Brazilian women in the 1970s. So that the government themselves were shocked to find this out. So like that, there's examples in Philippines and many other countries. So we can produce that track record of the WHO. Then we can challenge that very strongly to say, how dare you try to come and act on the behalf of our government and act directly against the interests of South African people, and like that many other countries. So we need to challenge that and not just simply accept that the WHO will now take over because they're looking in our interest for health, etc., etc. We need to challenge it, and I'm sure there is a way to get to that. And of course, common law is beginning to pick up a lot of pace around the world. Lots of people are beginning to interview somebody like Christopher James and Professor Cahill also. They're using this, and we just need to really become very effective at it and really use it to great advantage. But from my little bit of understanding as a common person, is that you need to build up the support from the general public to say that the public's interest stands with common law, and we need public courts where the public comes forward and demands justice. So something to that effect, I think, has to be built up where this can actually take effect. Jazakumullah.
Shukran for that, Maulana Rafiq. Advocate Sabelo, you can come in a second. I just want to make the point that, in fact, common law is actually divine instruction. It's not really law. You have law and then you have instruction. A law is something you can't escape. You can't change. You can't break it. It just is. It just applies to your life, whether you like it or not, and whatever you do. And instruction and divine instructions, like the 10 commandments: do not steal, do not murder, do not commit blasphemy, and all of these things. Those are instructions. You can actually choose to ignore those instructions and disobey them. Obviously, then the law kicks in, okay? You disobey divine instruction, negative consequences occur to you because that's the law. And if you obey divine instruction, then you experience positive consequences. So basically, common law is natural divine instruction, right? And we can choose to follow divine instruction, obey it, and reap the positive consequences, because that's what the law will dictate. Or we can do the opposite, which basically most of humanity is doing right now. That's why the world is such a mess. So I just wanted to make that point. When you talk about common law, you have two kinds of common law. You have this law that comes from England called common law. It's not actually law again. But the common law we're talking about is really divine instruction, the law of the land, divine instruction, the 10 commandments. There's really just one common law, one divine instruction, that is do no harm. Okay, don't steal property, don't steal life, don't steal rights. That's basically the law, okay? But, and then everything revolves around that. But that's just the point I wanted to make. Advocate Sabelo, you can come in again.
Can I just add something before Advocate says something there? Mustafa Akyol, in his book, Islam Between Extremes, he actually traced the origin of common law in the West. And he said it came from North Africa into Sicily. Now, there was an Islamic presence in Sicily for 200 years, and many of the Frankish rulers there, or the Norman rulers there, were very much influenced by Islamic law. And then it made its way over to England and made its way over to America and to other places from there. And because Muslims were so skilled at law, Islam is in fact really a religion. A religion of law in that sense, that even Hugo Grotius, with his international law in 1625, he plagiarized most of the work of Ash-Shatibi, who wrote about 600 or 800 years before him. So I think it's lovely to, as you are putting that emphasis on some divine law or law that is common, and I think this is a great takeaway for me to see how very broad common law is, and I had a much more confined and narrow understanding of common law as such.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ahmad. Shukran. Sabelo, Advocate Sabelo, you still there? Are you there,
Yes,
Advocate?
I'm back.
Okay,
I'm back. Sorry
okay,
about
okay.
that.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah, no. It's very true what you're saying about the broad nature of common law, and that is why in some places it's basically referred to as indigenous law, because it's the uncodified law which just flows naturally from the creator, basically. So I was basically saying earlier, where the network cut off, that where it comes to the issue of the World Health Organization and their protocols and everything, we are in a position to challenge that. And part of it will have to flow from a situation where definitely we look into the whole issue behind the common law approach to things, where is the people of South Africa basically coming up and challenging, because the Constitution, even when you look at the preamble to the Constitution, it basically captures a scenario that basically says we, the people, are responsible for this Constitution. This is our Constitution, and it's for the people, by the people, and all that funny jargon. I suppose for them, they were putting it out as a way of just getting everyone happy, but we can use it legally against the system that designed it, so that we can actually get these things in place and going forward. And the whole aspect, therefore, in the case that we're talking about now, that should of itself be one of the most important doors by which to begin to challenge these particular protocols that are in place. Where in protocols, I'm not necessarily confining it to the so-called COVID protocols, but all the international protocols related to treaties and how treaties should be looked at and applied, and the significance of these treaties in as far as who we are as a nation.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that, Advocate Sabello. Anyone else want to?
I have a, I have a comment. I think, what really struck me, Ricardo, about your presentation is you didn't confine yourself only to the PCR test, and you addressed the government on the WHO, and you addressed them on Bill Gates, and just a variety of different matters. I think the other important letter that needs to go out is to let them prove to us that this is really a vaccine, because emergency use authorization that is not FDA approved, that could be approved only in 2 years from now, and it's not licensed. So if that conversation is just at least opened up through one of your letters to show, and because if it's not a vaccine, then the vaccine companies do not have that legal immunity. So I think that's going to be an important letter that needs to go out. The other letter is that the gel that is around the vaccine definitely has some nanoparticles. And so this is violating what Fakhri always says, the GMO Act, where only 3 items could be included in genetically modified matter. So I think maybe those two, especially then getting them on that, because these vaccine companies are just running amok, and we need to at least get some of these legal letters out, since you are so very broad in those other type of issues that you see are all interconnected and all related in some way.
Well, you think a letter to whom? Who must the letter be addressed to, Dr. Ahmed?
I don't know. I think Ricardo and Sabila would know best who it should be addressed to. But I think just bringing out that conversation in the first place, so that we really bring more people's attention to this, that we are speaking here of a EUA, and in the case of I think 2006 Doe versus Donald Rumsfeld, where the court decides, U.S. Supreme Court decided that you cannot enforce a emergency utilization or use authorization on anyone if it has not been FDA approved or so on, you know?
Yeah, on the vaccine issue, Sabella and I, I just want to make one point. Sabella and I were looking at an interdict against the vaccine rollout a few months ago. We didn't go very far, but the thing is, there is a group up in Joburg who contacted me, and they launching a case now, a legal challenge against government regarding the vaccine issue. So that is in the works right now. You know, they're just starting out. So, but there are people obviously working on the vaccine issue from a legal perspective. We want to do an interdict, as I said a few months ago, but we didn't really get very far. And then to Sevilla to go to Tanzania also. So, but that's been taken up by, or the legal challenge is being launched by another group up in Joburg. So we'll keep you guys posted. We may need to get involved also, Ricardo and whoever else, you know, wants to get involved. But we'll keep you guys up to speed with that. Advocate Sevilla, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, amongst the critical things about the emergency use authorization is that generally, unless of course, if again they have changed the meanings of words and changed the definitions, emergency use authorization basically comes in a scenario where it's not yet recognized as a vaccine. It's still basically at trial stage till it gets the FDA approval. So basically what's happening at the moment is that everything that is being peddled around is not actually a vaccine. And the other angle that I think we need to think more about is a scenario which speaks to the fact that the Minister of Health a few weeks ago made a public admission that what we have, this Johnson & Johnson thing, is actually still an experiment, and these people are still conducting trials. From the perspective of the national interests and the common law position, the question that we need to be putting forward further is why is the Minister of Finance budgeting 10 billion rands for an experimental vaccine or an experimental medication which is on trial by Johnson & Johnson? Because necessarily if it's on trial, it means therefore the results are still in a position where they have to be compiled by Johnson & Johnson, and they can tweak their thing here and there depending on what the outcomes. Why is our taxpayers' money being put forward to subsidize this Johnson & Johnson trial that is going on? And further, it challenges the whole thinking behind a vaccination passport. If this thing is not yet a vaccine, how on earth do you then proceed to say people must take it and then get a passport to move around? So it basically broadens some of the issues that with time we'll have to interrogate further and see the extent to which we can deal with it. We don't have to stop the process that Ricardo is on now. We push that process forward, but at the same time begin to identify these other side issues that will keep them busy and keep them challenged as regards what is happening. In the hope that over and above the whole idea of taking up the legal challenges, it's also awakening the people to realize the scam that is going on.
Yeah, that's very important, actually, to wake people up to realize the scam that is going on. Very well put there. Okay, and that's the real issue we have today, is that people are still fast asleep, many of them. That's a big challenge, unfortunately. having a world full of sleepers. But a lot of people have woken up and continue to wake up, which is really heartening to see. But we need more. Okay, I think we're nearing the end now. So if anybody wants to make their final comments, that'll be great. Can we start with you, Noah? Sister Noah? Are you still there? I think she's left. Okay. Ricardo, would you like to say a final comments?
Okay. I just want to say that, look, I think all of these other challenges, I think it's very important. I think it's very important for us to keep it in the back of our minds in terms of challenging the vaccines, all of the crimes that have been committed here. I just believe, obviously, I could be a little bit biased towards our case here, but I believe that we need to first put them decisively on the back foot. And I think on any of the other arguments that you argue with them, and you accept the premise that there is a deadly virus, it will be very difficult to get any decisive victories on the other issues here. So once we get a success on this, I think they will be on the back foot. And then what I want to do is, obviously part of my extension, I want to thank Advocate Sabella for agreeing to work with me on this. But part of the idea is, once this opens the door then for us, we will then be able to rush through. We will be able to rush through, and we will be able to bring criminal charges to people. We will be able to question the treaties and all of those things. But I think it will be very difficult for us to do so if we can't first win this battle, because it's hard for anyone, for the public to agree with us, or for court to agree with us, if we say we think the government has overdone it a little bit, but we accept it. We don't challenge the idea that there's a deadly virus. It will just be a battle of attrition, and they will win. But in this instance, if we can win this first decisive battle, then they will be on the back foot now on every single issue. They will be on the back foot on criminal charges, on treaties, and we will be able to get them on all of those. And so from my point of view, and this is the appeal that I want to make as well to people out there, is please come forward and support me as much as we can on this issue, because I think this is the crucial battle for us to win now. We need to put all our legal minds and all our effort on this. Once we crack this open, we have to move over to the rest. But what I'm saying is that we have to keep in mind what is the rest that's going to come here. So we have to prepare those criminal charges, gather that evidence together, and we have to, all that information we have on the vaccines and who are the parties that are involved here, institutions, individuals, what kind of structures are involved. Essentially, what my intention is, after I get, inshallah, get this victory on proving that there isn't a vaccine, is to then lay the case out for subversion, to lay out the case that our country has been subverted. And there cannot be any more clearer evidence than a pandemic pushed down our throats with a virus that doesn't exist. And so then, because what we have discussed here tonight is subversion. We have discussed an issue where our colonial masters have come here and put their law to be the common law here. We have discussed a situation where these guys sneak definitions through. We have discussed a situation where Parliament and the President has committed us to international treaties that are not in the best interest of the country. That is subversion. And so what I'm saying is that's the next step I want to take, because I think if we get this one and we take the next step as a step of subversion, meaning our country has been corrupted, tentacles has been spread, and then we remove them legally, and we set things straight as they should be in whatever we think has been subverted. So I think that's the way that we need to go, and I therefore obviously want to make the appeal to anybody who's listening. If we're going to broadcast this, please come forward, support what we are doing. We need as much resources as possible. We need as much legal experts as possible to volunteer, unfortunately. And if the public come forward with sponsors, etc., then we can make sure people have some resources. But I believe, I could be wrong, I'm biased, maybe I'm just motivating this, but I think this is a do or die battle. Everything else, it's a war of attrition, and they will win on that one. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to everybody. And I ask that, that we all pray here for the success of this. Without prayer, we can't succeed as well.
Absolutely true. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Shukran for that, Brother Ricardo. As you've heard, there's a call out for shout out or call out, whatever you want to call it, for assistance from all sectors of society. The more that can join in and provide this assistance, the better our chances of slaying the beast, I would say. Okay, Sister Noah, are you there? I think she's left us, got to look after her children, I suppose.
I will,
Doctors,
I
are you
am here,
there?
Dr.
Oh, you
Kirsten.
are there. Okay, all
Yes,
right. You want to
sorry.
say your
No,
last
I am
final comment? You're
Yes.
multitasking, I know.
Yeah, I
then.
just want.
Okay,
Yeah,
go
I'm so
ahead.
sorry about that. Now, I just
That's
wanted
fine.
to say to everyone in the group, I don't come with legal expertise or any solid professional background, but I'm more than happy to help, be it with research or admin. So if anyone needs Ricardo, you're welcome to call on me. If you want me to just read copious amounts of documents or whatever it is, I'm happy to assist.
Okay, thank you. Shukran for that, Sister Noah. I very much appreciate that. Dr. Ahmad, you wanted to come in? Final comment?
Yeah, I just want to say, if I listen to Rainer in Germany, and also he hopes to go to the second Nuremberg trials, and I listened to Dr. Tenpenny, and she has an 8th boot camp, and she's got 400 physicians in this camp, and maybe a few thousand already in the system that has gone through that training. And Stefan Lanka and other people, and Dolores Cahill, I see a lot of optimism from these international figures. And I just want you to keep that optimism high, because I think that's, if we look at the master frame that is out there, one of fear and death and pestilence, and our one is of freedoms and human rights and religious liberties and so on. So I think that is most important for you to keep that spirit up high. But it's so interesting that many of these international heroes or warriors, they are speaking about the importance of spirituality, and how spirituality is so essential in this particular fight. We are also entering Ramadan now, and I think this is perhaps a time to increase our energies and our efforts around this, and see this as an act of ibadah, as an act of worship. I sometimes worry because almost 16 African leaders have been taken out, I would say, including the president of Tanzania and people around him. I didn't realize it was 16 altogether. I thought it was just him and so on. And then also sometimes this Canadian billionaire that were, they were going to turn one drug into a generic drug, and they were just brutally murdered almost a year ago. So we are also dealing with people that are behaving like mafia. They have their own mercenary forces out there. So we pray for your safety, the safety of your team. We pray for greater support for you. And we also, if you know there's avenues that we could help and support financially, then we will try to get some funds from the side.
Okay, Shukran. Thank you for that, Dr. Ahmad. Yeah, look, it is a holistic war. I mean, it's an attack on your physical being, your psychological side, your sociological side, and primarily, I think it's a spiritual attack. It's an attack on your spirituality. And so your defense must primarily be a spiritual defense. So definitely primarily a spiritual warfare that we involved in at the moment. So thank you for that, Dr. Ahmad. Shukran. Advocate Sabella, your final comments before we wrap up?
Thank you very much, Dr. Kirsten. Look, we are in this together. Ricardo, thanks a lot for getting the ball rolling. And I fully agree with you that of primary importance is addressing this issue of the existence or non-existence of this so-called virus. And everything literally hinges upon that, because without it, then what is everything else about? Whether you're talking about the PCR, you're talking about the mask, you're talking about the lockdowns, everything is literally linked and related to that particular aspect. So all I can basically say in a nutshell is, yes, we're together. Let's hook up, my brother, and we see how we structure how we go forward. But definitely I'm readily available to work on this one. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for the commitment. And
Thank you.
it's when we team up our different skills, expertise, and energies that we'll get over this thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Advocate Sabelo, and thank you, Sister Noah, Brother Ricardo, Dr. Ahmad. Maulana Rafik has left us a while back. So thank you very much, Fikran, and appreciate it. And till next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam.
Alaikum salam.
Oh, I love that.